So it opens up in Ennis, Alaska. It was actually filmed in Iceland. I looked it up. 150 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And it was December 17th, the last sunset of the year. And they're at an Arctic research station, and a man named Clark starts shaking. And he says,
She's awake.
then we go to December 20th, and a delivery man walks into the station trying to talk to anyone to get in and get out.
Guys, I need a signature. Come on, I have to get back.
And that Ferris Bueller scene is like on a loop. It's that same scene that was on earlier when they were all
Yeah.
hanging out together, and it's like stuck on a loop. And then he finds a severed tongue on the floor, and here we go. So then we meet Navarro for the first time. She comes into a shop to see a man knocked out, and there's been like a history of domestic abuse with him and a female worker at this plant.
What's the story here? He hits me, I moved out, he didn't like it.
So she finds out what happens and she locks him up, but then she gets a phone call. And then enter Jodie Foster. It's the first time she's on screen as Liz Danvers. And then we meet Hank Pryor as well.
This is what this place looks like on the inside, huh?
He has a son, Pete, also, that we'll talk about in a little bit. So we find out that the entire research station has gone missing. And Ferris Bueller still playing on a loop, and she freaks out because she hates the Beatles, apparently, and she manages to turn it off.
Not a Beatles fan, okay?
So then Pete starts going through the names of all the missing researchers. Pete is Hank's son. And then Liz finds written on a whiteboard, "We are all dead." And then Liz also deduces that they have been missing for at least 48 hours because she knows her cold cuts and what mayo looks like after a couple days.
Mayo's like syrup. Mayo doesn't go running until a couple days out of the fridge.
And then she also finds out that the tongue is a native woman's tongue.
Remember that native auntie that we found a year ago? She had the same marks. Comes from licking the thread. You're fixing the fishing nets. That is a native woman's tongue.
Then, like, the weirdest part of the episode for me, this woman, we don't know her name. We find out she's Rose later on.
Rose. Yeah.
She sees a man named Travis. And at first I'm like, what is this guy with barefoot and no jacket doing out there in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere? And of course, later on, spoiler alert, we find out that he's dead and this person's just in her mind. It was just we got like 3 scenes with them, but it turned out to play a huge part later on. So we'll talk about it when we get to it. Navarro seems to think the tongue belongs to a woman from the cold case.
It's not her tongue.
How do you know?
It's been 6 years. Can't be her tongue.
So Annie K. So Navarro has a really strong history with this cold case because she was there on scene and she saw the brutality done to this Annie. So she never found the murderer. Maybe it'll tie into whoever did this to the researchers. I'm sure it will. Then we see a scene with Danvers arguing with her daughter about making a sultry video with another female.
Ooh.
Then, while they're arguing, we see a woman who turns out to be drunk, comes out of nowhere, and crashes into a pole. So Stacy gets locked up. We see another scene with her later when she's in the jail. Then Navarro goes to see a man named Ryan to talk about Annie. We find out Ryan is Annie's brother. So he doesn't seem too interested in going through all of this again. It seems to bring up a lot of pain and bad memories for him. So he doesn't really want to work through any of this.
Don't take this wrong.
I loved my sister, and I wish like hell she was still here. But I'm not sure it'd do much good to go through all this again.
Navarro then gets a call from another cop named Cooper, and she goes in to see, which we find out is Navarro's sister named Jules, and she's going through some mental problems. So we'll see what that comes into play later. Yeah, she's got that going on, and Cooper said,
Business between us.
so Pete is at the station looking at the funding for the research center, but during this time, Stacy's freaking out. So then Danvers is like, nah, we're not letting Stacy out.
The fuck you are? She's still drunk.
Yeah, so I'll drive her home.
Accuses Hank of having fellatio with Stacy every now and then. He's like, hey, I got a fiance.
I'm not letting a still drunk DUI out just because sometimes she blows you.
She's like, whatever. Get me the files on Annie. I want to look into it a little bit.
And I need the Ann Kotok file. You got it.
Do I?
Yeah, it's at your place.
I'll check.
But she doesn't seem to trust him because of what we find out later with what Pete does. And that happens this scene because Pete is at home. He's about to get it on with his girl, Kayla, but Danvers calls wanting something from Hank's house, the files that she just asked Hank for.
And then the kid, Pete's kid that he has with that woman, with Kayla, he's like under the desk drawing like these weird, it was a blue haired creature like the sister, which was funny. But like she was like dripping blood and everything, which is like another thing that's just like, oh, there must be some like native Because he's like, oh, grandma's telling her those stories again. And it's just, oh, there must be something that's going to tie in as well.
So, yeah, Pete heads over to Hank, his father's house, and he has this excuse saying he needs a picture from when he was young to show Darwin. He promised he would show him. So, while he's there, he's really there for the files on Annie, and he's distracting his dad, asking for food and trying to keep him out of the room for as long as possible. Comes up with the idea to toss the file out the window, and then when Hank's like, all right, what you take? He does actually have a picture that he brought with him to have as an excuse to be like, hey, this is
Which
what I
like
was
is
doing.
really smart. I would never
It
do
is,
that.
yeah.
Didn't know I still had that.
So then we see the mystery woman Rose again, and she's following Trevor with no jacket and no shoes on, who is a ghost. We get one more scene with those two later. Pete brings over the files to Danvers' house of the Annie K cold case.
Anne Masu Kotok. People called her Annie K. Stabbed 32 times.
And then she had her tongue also cut off, and it was never recovered. So Navarro was obsessed with this case.
Body was found on the edge of the villages. Navarro was the first on the scene.
She went too far. She got in fights with people. So she was taken off the case by Hank.
She got in a couple of fights with some line workers. Your dad had to take her off the case.
And then Liz says
This one was never going to be solved.
it kind of drove Navarro mad, and she got demoted because of it. So then Navarro goes to her booty call, and then she goes on to steal his SpongeBob toothbrush.
You don't steal
Yeah.
a man's SpongeBob toothbrush. You just
That's-
don't.
Hey, well, that's my toothbrush.
That's his precious. And then after that, she goes to pick up booze, and she sees that asshole from earlier who had his nose broken in that confrontation with the metal bucket. So she pours liquor into his gas tank, right? That's where his gas tank was, I guess.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, weird place for a gas tank, but hey, whatever. So and then while she's driving, she spots a one-eyed polar bear.
So polar bears are like a sign of resilience, which ties into the whole Alaska thing, because you got to be pretty resilient to live in Alaska when it's dark that much of the year. And then the one-eyed thing is like, it's like a two-eyed theory from like indigenous. One eye is like set on the indigenous world, and then one eye is set on the Western world, and it's supposed to help like indigenous peoples kind of adapt to the way that the world changes and to like how cultures blend together.
And then we see Liz Danvers at home, and she has spread out all of the information she has on the scientists from the research station. And it was a really cool image of her on top of all the files. And then she's digging through the Annie K docs, and she notices that Annie's coat had a rip on the shoulder. And then one of the researchers had that same coat that had a patch on that side of the shoulder. Most likely is the same coat. Could he be the killer of Annie K? Possibly. Could he know someone that did it? Possibly. Could he be involved? Absolutely could be involved. So then Rose and Trevor again, he does a little dance and he points off into the distance, and we find out in just a second where he was pointing and what that led to. But Liz runs into Navarro at the research station, and she shows her the coat.
I don't know. Anything that might have belonged to her. Shoe, earring.
A coat?
So they go to the man's room who was wearing the coat. His name is Raymond Clark, and he was the only person who had a solo room by himself.
The only one with a room of his own.
They talk more about Annie K's case, and Navarro is still really pissed off about the whole thing. This is when they had that talk about if it was a white woman, it would have been different, never would have happened.
Right.
Wouldn't have happened if she was white, though.
Wouldn't make any difference what color her
It
skin
would have. They
was.
would have had the whole fucking police force out looking for a white ass.
And she's really just pissed and wants answers on this cold case, and you can see it's really, really eating at her. The end of the episode, Danvers gets a call. They found something in the ice. Who found something in the ice? Rose did.
Rose Aganal, Chief. Rose Aganal found it.
Rose says,
Travis showed me.
Navarro's like, Travis is dead. She's like, yeah, I know. He still showed me.
Travis is dead.
I know.
So then we see three of them, right? Three of the scientists.
Yes.
Yes.
Were buried with their heads in the ice and their hands sticking out. So that's it. That's the first episode. So it starts off with how last episode ended, and they're examining the bodies. There was more than three. That's all I saw last week, but we find out the number later on in this episode. So she's examining the bodies. They have burnt eyeballs. They have exploded eardrums. And one of them seems to have scratched his own eyes out, says Peter. So while this is going on, Rose is talking to Navarro, and she's like, you might want to sit this one out.
Maybe leave this one for someone else, Missy.
And she can't because it's tied to Annie K's case. She swears it is anyway. We find out later that it in fact is in this episode.
It's tied to Annie's case, Rose.
Oh, then you're screwed.
And then one of the cops is digging around and accidentally breaks off one of the arms of one of the corpses. And then the weirdest part of the whole episode for me, one of the men starts screaming. So he survived.
Weirdly enough.
And then we got, confirmation when she was talking to the nurse.
It's not looking good, ma'am. We'll have to amputate at least one leg.
Danvers goes to see a man named Bryce. He's a school teacher.
I need you to explain to me what Solal Station does.
We'll come back to that in just a minute. Rose is talking to Navarro about Travis, and then we get the confirmation that Travis is, in fact, Rust's father in this episode.
He knew he was dying. He didn't want the leukemia to take him.
They even say Travis Cole, so yeah.
One last gift from Travis Cole.
So Navarro is talking to Rose about how she can see the dead and what they want.
Some come because they need to tell you something that you need to hear. And some of them just want to take you with them.
Then back to the conversation with Bryce and Danvers. And Bryce says they were kind of weird, those scientists, right? Usually people would work in shifts with this type of thing, but no one would go in, no one would go out. They would all just work and stay there. And the work they were doing was very serious. They could end up curing cancer and other serious diseases.
The work they were doing could end up curing cancer, autoimmune diseases, genetic disorders, just an absolute fucking game changer.
So that's what they were working on. Back to Rose and Navarro. Rose asks if she saw the symbol on one of the victims' foreheads, and then she draws that symbol out in the snow. Navarro asks her about it. She says, I don't know, but I know it's very old.
Older than Ennis.
Okay, intro Captain Connolly, and he wants to send the case to Anchorage because they don't have the resources for this type of case in Ennis. And then Danvers reads a clause about frozen bodies and says they need to thaw in 38 degrees for at least 48 hours, or they're worthless for forensics. Danvers goes to the woman whose family owns the mines, who also owns the ice rink, asks permission to thaw the bodies. She agrees, but just for the town, not because apparently she hates Danvers, which a lot of people seem to hate Danvers in this community. And they bring in the bodies. There's 5 of them that they can see so far, 5 heads, 9 legs, and they all have burnt eyeballs and busted eardrums, and that's something that they're looking into. So then Navarro shows up, shows the tattoo that was on Annie's body, the swirl. So Navarro thinks that has, a huge meaning. At this point, Danvers still doesn't want to work with Navarro at all because of their past together. So she kind of literally pushes her to get out of here. We don't need you. Take a hike.
She tells her to F off specifically.
And at this point, this is when Navarro goes to see Ryan again, Annie K's brother, and she asks if he knows the scientist Raymond Clark. Shows him the picture.
No, I don't think I ever saw him.
You sure?
He's like, hey, I don't know this guy. If they were dating, I was never introduced to him, so I don't know him.
I don't know. If she was seeing him, she never introduced him.
And then another individual walks out, and he's one of the miners, and he's like, oh, I don't know him, but he does know him. We find out later. Then a fight breaks out about the miners poisoning the water.
My kids don't drink the same water! You mining people are poisoning your own kids! I'm sick and tired of you pretending you don't see it! We fucking feed your kids!
So I imagine whatever they were doing, and this is probably what led to Annie's death as well, is there were some sort of laws or regulations that they were trying to circumvent together to reach both of their causes. Because we also learned the scientists were just hell-bent on whatever they were, they had no personality or anything.
Yeah.
They were just obsessed with their work.
At this point, Danvers and Peter are going through photos and evidence, and they're talking about the symbol on the forehead. How scared would you have to be to run out on the ice with no shoes? Why were the clothes folded like that? Could it have been the killer? Why would he fold them?
Why are the clothes folded like that?
Could it have been Raymond Clark? Because, he's still missing at this point.
So maybe the killer folded them.
Then we have video evidence, since Peter had the bright idea to use facial recognition to open up one of the phones in an earlier scene. So they see that scene that we saw last week of Clark having this seizure moment and then him saying she's awake. So it's cool that they have that. And I wonder if they'll dig into that even a little bit more. We find out the delivery man from last week, his name is Wallace. So he's talking about Clark to Peter. And he just says, hey, he wasn't right. There's something wrong with him.
I don't think the guy was right.
I even saw him butt-ass naked one time.
And once I saw him hanging out, all natural, skinny ass.
He's just a strange cat. And then Peter asks about the symbol. And he goes, yeah, Clark had that tattooed on his chest.
Hey, have you seen this before?
Yeah, Clark had that thing. He had it tattooed on his chest.
That gives Peter the idea to, I'm going to share this with Danvers, and Danvers looks into it more. I think that was one of the best parts of the episode when we find out that information later.
I mean, we see Danvers looking through some of Clark's research later, right? And there were a bunch of squiggles, like writing all over it. So so Wallace saying that, oh, he was acting weird and everything. So I took like some screenshots of that writing, and like some of the stuff
Oh,
like
I
he
did the
has
same
written.
thing.
He's like, oh God, never say her blank, never say blank. I can hear, feel her name. I can hear her moving,
Mhm.
her fingers cold, dark, her eyes. And that's one of them.
Yeah,
Then
it's like her
like,
face, her eyes, her face, her eyes, something
right.
like that.
And then another one is it says, oh God, never sleep. So I think it's safe to assume that whatever was bugging Raymond Clark, he also was not sleeping. And that was making him
Yeah.
seem even weirder. He's not just writing these on the outside, he's writing them right on top of valuable research. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And then also something that we didn't mention last week, Wallace says,
I thought I saw somebody when I got to the station yesterday, but it couldn't be, right?
and we do see someone run by. So I'll put that clip in here. And that's probably Raymond Clark, right? Probably him.
I
who
think
was
that
there.
makes the most sense. Yeah.
It would
Yeah.
make sense.
So then Navarro goes to see the man at the bar who claimed he didn't know Raymond Clark, and she goes to confront him. He's like, hey, you want me to lock you up for not paying your bill? Talk to me. So it turns out Raymond Clark bought a trailer off of this man's cousin, who is now deceased.
Can't you ask your cousin? Dad.
And he's like, that's all I know. So she's like, all right, give me information on your cousin. Give me information on the trailer. He says exactly what kind of trailer it is. So she knows what she's looking for. So we're moving in the right direction in that case. Now over to Hank. He's texting his fiance. And as he's doing this, she asks for pictures. So he goes looking for pictures to send instead of just taking a selfie of himself. And he realizes that the Annie K files are gone. So he's pissed. And we knew that was going to come. We knew that was going to happen. Okay, big thing here. Last week, they were talking about who funds the Salao station, and it was cut off because of the drunk woman in the cell, and we never got the answer to that. So we got it this week.
If you follow the taxes, you can trace it back to a shell company called NC Global Strategies, which in turn belongs to Tuttle United.
And they have their hand in everything. So Vex, Tuttle United, explain who they are.
So Tuttle United is run by the Tuttle family, which we found was a very influential family in season 1 of True Detective. The Tuttle family and the Tuttle Foundation were basically the reason why all the shit that happened in season 1 happened, and literally no one heard about it, why it kept trying to get swept under the rug and all of that stuff. So if we're making that connection now, like we already know likely what the swirl means. So it's probably connected to the same thing, Carcosa. We also know that the Tuttles are doing something out in Antarctica, because there was also another line that Rose says earlier during her conversation with Navarro. It feels like the world is coming apart at the seams, and it's starting in Ennis. And in season 1, it was like the whole point was that you commit all of this occult activity and stuff in order to find like a higher way of living, or be a higher being, or find some sort of like strength in the afterlife or whatever. Maybe in that sense, whatever the scientists are doing and whatever the Tuttles were doing in Louisiana, it's two twigs on the same branch kind of deal. So it's like, what exactly were these people actually mining for? We know that, oh, it could cure a bunch of diseases, but what's then the tie-in with the swirl? That's all.
So then we have a couple scenes. Leah was at Peter's house, and Kayla's grandmom was drawing an indigenous tattoo on her chin. That really pisses Danvers off, and she gets into an argument with him. I don't know why she was so controlling in that moment.
I was going to say, we don't know why she's pissed off about that, right?
And then Hank confronts Pete for stealing evidence. He slaps him in the face. He talks about family, how blood is more important than anything. Don't forget you have family. And then the weirdest scene of the episode, Danvers and the Captain bang.
So you fucked me with the bodies, then you come to actually fuck me.
The coolest part, in my opinion, of this whole episode, Danvers gets the credit history for Raymond Clark, and she finds out when and where he got the tattoo. So she's able to talk to the tattoo artist, and she says he was a little weird. He cried after it was finished, and she sends photos of the tats.
And here's one showing the model for the work. Lady.
And we don't see who it is right then and there, but we see it next scene when she goes to Navarro's house, and it was Annie K. And then this is when we find out the tongue also belonged to Annie K. So now Danvers wants to work with Navarro.
You got the same tattoo, sir. Here's the DNA results. That was Annie's tongue at Salal.
And he got the tattoo like a couple days after she died.
That's 4 days after she died.
So yeah, then we get the scene with Navarro and Kavik, and they're talking about the case, and they realize the trailer was bought so they can fucking private.
That's why he got the trailer, to keep it a secret.
And then they both agree at the same time that where would you hide it? You'd hide it at the Nook.
Where do you keep a trailer at a fucking secret? The Nook.
And she goes there and she finds it. And then she immediately calls Danvers, says, hey, you might want to come check that out. And they go in and they're searching around the trailer and they find Annie K's cell phone. And then they look in a sheet covered section and it's basically like a shrine with the symbol on the roof. And it's really just strange scene. That whole scene was really strange. And then we get the final scene. Pete calls Danvers as the bodies start to thaw out, and there's only 6 of them.
It's only 6 of them. See?
Clark isn't there. Navarro is sure that he's alive and he's still out there somewhere.
He's not here. Clark's not here. He's alive. He's out there.
All right, so things actually kick off with a flashback, and we see 7 years ago when Navarro first meets Annie K. She goes to her house to arrest her.
In Masu Kautok. Yeah? You're under arrest for trespassing and the destruction of private property at the Silver Sky mining facilities.
But it turns out there was a childbirth going on at the time, so she's like, you're gonna need a minute. Navarro's cool with that. They go through with it, and looked like for a second the baby was gonna die, and that made me super uncomfortable. I'm like, I don't want to see a baby die right now. And luckily they did CPR, everything was okay. And then she puts her hands up. She's like, okay, now you can take me. Back to December 22nd, the 5th day of night, and Hank has assembled a ragtag group of locals to help out with the search. He jumps on top of a truck, gives a speech, and he's like, hey, Raymond Clark's the suspect. Let's go find this guy.
Suspect is Raymond Clark, 5'11", brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a pink parka.
Then they get a call about the scientist. He lost both of his legs, maybe another arm, and he's not looking good. But then Danvers tells Pete to hack Annie's phone, but there's something on his mind. He wants to know what's up with her and Navarro.
What happened in the last case you worked with Navarro? The Wheeler case. Because that was it for you guys, right?
There was a case, the Wheeler case, where it was a murder-suicide, and we find out that this guy was a real piece of shit. He was beating an 18-year-old girl. He sent her to the hospital 2 times. She wouldn't report it.
Oh, she was drunk, officer. Fell down the stairs, officer.
But then they got the call, and they were too late.
Just back to the William Wheeler case, though, like in the flashback, it's shown that he was alive when Danvers and Navarro got there.
Yeah.
But Danvers is like, he shot himself, but that clearly wasn't the case. And he was like evilly laughing in this little like ice shack. He was kind of like Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin.
All right, everyone, chill.
So was he actually still alive? Because in the way I took it was that he was dead when they got there, but she was like haunted by him. So
No.
The
flashback shows that he was alive, so it's more inferred that because of the scale of the situation, because Danvers takes the time to explain sexual assault, battery, robbery, he was taking up with minors and all this stuff. So it's very intentional that this guy's a piece of shit, because we see the body of the girl in the doorway. So it's more like in the heat of the moment, because this guy was such a piece of shit and maybe that girl didn't deserve the fate that she got, Danvers will assume shot him, but she says, oh, it was a murder-suicide, and they played it up like that. And then Navarro couldn't kind of deal with, I guess, the weight of knowing that, and that's what separates them.
But yeah, this is when they split up. So Navarro gets transferred, and then we see her back in real time, and she's on the search. She tosses an orange, and it gets tossed back to her. There was a lot of weird supernatural stuff this episode. Like,
Yes.
It was a lot of strange things going on. So then at the station, they start going through Clark's things, all the photos all around, and they're like, okay, well, they seem to be in a happy relationship.
She looks happy. They look happy.
But it was a secret relationship. Why?
Why keep it a secret?
Then they find a candid photo that was taken by someone else. So at least one person knew of this relationship.
That's a candid photo. Somebody was there with them that day.
And then they find a pic that has hair dye on it, which connects to this hairdresser. They have a lead. They go see the hairdresser. Navarro's like, hey, you lied to me. You say you didn't know anything about this. She's like, all right, I knew Clark. I went to Slough to give haircuts, and he really wanted to come. She came. Her and Clark hit it out. He was fixated on her tattoo. Which tattoo? This one? Yeah, that one. The swirl. Then the woman claims he was crazy about her, but Annie wanted it to be a secret, saying that it was Annie. Annie changed because that's not like Annie to want a secret like this.
That was weird.
So why? And the reason why this woman, this hairdresser, was so quiet about it because she was also seeing someone at the station.
Plus, I was seeing a guy from Salal. Who? Oliver Tagak.
A guy named Oliver. We meet him later on. So he left apparently before Annie died, so he wasn't at the research station when all this went down. And she did call the police. She told them about Clark. Who did she talk to? Hank.
After they found her, I did call the police. I just didn't want to talk to you because you'd have known me, so I didn't leave my name.
Navarro and Danvers, they're in the car. They're driving to go see Hank. And Navarro's saying it's the mines, they're behind it. They did it. Annie was protesting them. They had a reason to want to harm her. They're behind it. And then Danvers is like, well, half the town works there. So that means half the town would have a reason to kill her. And are the mines responsible for Clark too? Why would they want to get him involved? Some people think he's a suspect. Maybe he's not a suspect. What's going on with that? Okay, so then this is when we get to the part where Navarro confronts Hank about not reporting Annie Kay and Clark's relationship.
You received a direct call about Annie Kay's and Raymond Clark's relationship. A direct call.
Because we knew he had that knowledge. And he says, well, she was banging everyone. What do you want me to do? Hank, clearly shady, clearly hiding something. You know, what? I don't know. Why? I don't know. Maybe he has the people in the mines paying him. Who knows why he's hiding something, but he's definitely clearly hiding something. Why was he so mad about his son getting the Annie K files over to Danvers in the first place? Whatever. So tempers flare, words are said, and then it ends with Danvers splashing a coffee in Hank's face and telling him to fuck off and go back to work. And then Navarro's pissed off and she walks off. Yeah, that doesn't go well. And then we find out that the forensic tech got delayed again due to weather, due to snow, a blizzard. And Pete says his cousin is a vet and he can come help. Navarro goes to see Kavik and he's ice fishing. She asks if he knew Oliver. He'll ask around for a price. He wants to know something personal about Navarro and then he'll find out.
Thing is, I know you know someone who knows someone.
It's called quid pro quo. You tell me something, I tell you something.
She storms off. She comes back, and then he asks about her mom. We find out she's from Boston.
She left when she was 15, met my dad in Boston. Boom. Now get me to Gok.
Her mom took them and ran because their father was a piece of shit, apparently, but the mom wasn't okay mentally, and it's kind of been passed down generationally to Jules, and that's how she's acting out right now and having her own problems.
She was not okay. She...
Like Jules?
So yeah, one day they ran away and never came back. When they got to Alaska, her mom was killed, and the killer got away with it. He was never found. So another cold case that we find out about. So then we have another spot about the mines possibly poisoning the water supply, and there's a rally protest about it. Leah's there with her girlfriend. Navarro's out on the ice. She thinks she sees something on the ice. Again, another supernatural type of thing. I don't know. She falls and hits her head, and then she has a vision of a kid holding a one-eyed polar bear. This is when Navarro gets a call about her sister Jules.
She started screaming that someone was coming, and she was praying. She just started praying.
She had an episode and ran off. Navarro knows where to find her.
But I imagine that's because we'll probably see that character end her life in the next episode or two. I really think she's gonna go die before the season ends.
You think Jules is done for?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
She's not in a good
sad.
place. Yeah.
Sorry, Jules. So then Pete goes home and he's having kind of a semi-tiff with his wife Kayla about his, being so busy, but he's in the middle of a case right now. So like, come on, cut him some slack. Kayla, what she was bitching about, Danvers taking priority. And then she called him and then texted him in caps. Did you find Oliver yet? Then we're in 1223, the 6th day of night. And there's a gathering wake situation for the stillborn baby that we found out earlier. Danvers goes and she turns on the water and it was black. So that's another thing with the water being poisoned possibly. And then the vet gets there, Pete's cousin Vinny. So he has some speculation. He's just a vet, but he says,
I think they died before they froze. Those guys, this is not how you die in the cold.
And then he guesses that they died from cardiac arrest because he's seen caribou die of plain fright and the scientists look the same. And then Danvers says,
I think you could do just like a tiny bit of postmortem. Chief. I'm just kidding. That'd be super illegal.
I actually thought that was funny. That part made me laugh.
That was kind of
That
funny.
was a little joke. Yeah. I like that too.
And then Navarro found Oliver thanks to Kavik. That guy works fast.
I found him.
He's living in a nomad camp on the North Shore. So what do? They go to his location and they ask the people there his whereabouts. They point to his house. They say, I don't know if he's home, but right there. And they knock on his door. He won't answer, but they realize that he is home. So they break in and he's just sitting there with a gun, not looking like he wants to talk to anyone. They ask about Annie. He won't help. But then when he learns that the scientists from Salal died, his tune changes a little bit.
Your ex-colleagues, they're dead.
He didn't know, and he specifically asks about Lund, the only guy who survived for now.
Lund is dead?
He seems like he's about to be more willing, and then they try to pry on Annie a little bit more, and he pulls his gun on them and tells them to leave.
Go now!
So then they get the call about Lund. He's had multiple amputations, lost his eyesight, part of it or all of it. He comes in and out of consciousness, but they're able to ask him what happened, and he says,
I woke her. Now she's out. She's out there in the ice.
so he's all totally freaked out, but then a fight breaks out in the lobby. What the hell is going on out there? And people calling each other hicks, and they're fighting, and cops are fighting, and chaos. And while this happens, Lund creepily rises. Another supernatural possession part of this episode. He rises up and he says,
Hello, Evangeline. Your mother says hello. She's waiting for you.
and then he starts convulsing and dies. So, final scene in the episode. Pete has cracked Annie's phone, and here's what we see on the phone.
I found it. It's here. I found it.
That's what we had for this episode. This episode, it starts off with Danvers watching the Annie K clip again. This is a big factor in this entire episode. They show it multiple times. And then we see it's Christmas Eve, the 7th day of night, and the bodies are getting packed up to go to Anchorage. Pete tells Danvers this over the phone.
They're early packing up the bodies to Anchorage.
While they're talking, she finds Jules taking off her clothes in freezing temperatures. So she's having
Just
another
outside
episode.
in the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just outside. She says, hey, get Navarro to the station. And back at the station, Navarro's with her. They're worried that they're going to lose the case.
The fuck is he here for? I got it. He better not be trying to take this case away from us. Case away from us.
She talks to Connolly in her office, and she's wondering why he's there. He's like, hey, don't worry, I'm not going to take the case off you. And then she shares the info that she got from cousin Vinny, the vet, that they died before they froze. And he's like, I don't really want to know how you knew that, but thanks for the information. And then we see Jules get taken to the lighthouse for help. Jules is trying to get help. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, but we see Pete was working on something that Danvers had requested for someone that had similar injuries as the corpse school scientists, and he found someone. This guy's name's Otis.
His name is Otis Heiss, white male admitted to St. Joseph's, April 98.
Burns on both corneas. Ruptured eardrums, self-inflicted bites.
And she wants people looking for him as well as Clark, so he's going to put out that APB to let the cops know that, hey, now we're on the lookout for 2 people.
We'll get the man out there looking for Clark and Otis. Maybe they're in the same place. Who knows?
And then Hank went to pick up his fiance, but poor guy got catfished. Big surprise.
Which we all knew was going to happen because, like,
shocker.
the
Yeah.
first time that plot line is even introduced, it's like, oh, the text messages say, oh, I'll send you more money or whatever for your mom. Oh, my mom is sick.
I felt so bad when they started closing up the plane.
Yeah.
His face. Oh,
Yeah.
it was heartbreaking.
And then Danvers and Navarro go see the school teacher that Danvers was having an affair with.
Oh, you didn't. Is there anyone in this town you haven't fucked?
She's got that rep. She's got that reputation around town, definitely around Ennis. And he confirms that they are whale bones in the Annie K video.
Well?
Yeah, those are definitely whale bones. Monodontoides, probably prehistoric.
He is going to be able to help, but first he looks for who mapped out the cave system.
You got a name?
1 second. Hayes. Otis Hayes.
Wait. Heiss? Otis Heiss?
It's Otis. So Otis again gets brought up again. It's Otis Heiss. Then we see Jules in her room at the lighthouse, and the orange rolls between her legs. And then she looks under the bed and sees her mom, right? Because that's the necklace.
Yeah, it's
I think
definitely the
so,
mom.
yeah.
Yeah. We see what happens with her in just a couple scenes. Hank gets to the station, pours himself a drink, talks to Pete about the situation. And then Pete's like, whoa, did you send her any money?
Listen, you didn't send her any money, did you?
And then Hank kind of ignores it, and we all know that's what happened at this point. He was catfished and she stole his money. Then Danvers goes to the mining office, which has been vandalized by Leah. And it says murderers graffitied on it. The owner lets Leah off for now because it's Christmas Eve, so she gives her a break. She initially wanted to press charges, but she lets her go. This is the scene where Navarro calls Jules to check in.
I love you, Angie. I love you too, baby girl.
But we see that Jules is outside at that boat again, looking out into the frozen sea, and we know what's coming. And then she takes off her clothes, strips down naked, walks off into the sea. Rest in peace. Yep, Vex called that last week, but now we're at the part where Leah runs off to get picked up by Kayla to go to Pete Pryor's house, and Danvers watches the video again and again And then she watches the She's Awake video, and then she puts two and two together that the power was cut off in both instances. So same MO.
It's the same MO in both cases.
She thought it was Oliver that was, possibly behind this
Yeah.
because of the work he did at the station. So that's what she says. She's like, hey, I'm going to pick you up. Navarro realizes that she's drunk. She's like, you're not picking me up.
Hell no. You're not going anywhere. You're wasted.
And then she's like, all right, I'll get Pete to pick you up. And then, of course, Pete has to leave his family again to go pick up Navarro. They go in. He's not there. Pete says the line.
This feels a lot like.
And I'm guessing they were talking about the station, how someone just vanished because
I think so, yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm guessing. And the symbol's drawn on the floor. It's also drawn on a rock, the swirl. The next part is when she drunk drives to Connolly's.
What?
Right.
I know.
Like she decides to just drive drunk to go see Connolly.
Okay, you want the truth? You were a better cop than me from day one, but you were terrible with people.
And you're like, no fucking shit. It's been 4
Yeah,
episodes.
clearly.
We know this already.
But yeah, he mentions about Jake and Holden, so I guess her husband also did die.
And after
What? Say it.
Jake and Holden, it got worse.
And then we see Hank being lonesome again after getting screwed over. This is when my wife felt bad for him in this part, where he was looking at the rose petals on the bed and he was all alone.
No.
And then the Alaska Coast Guard calls in about Jules.
Hello?
Evangeline Navarro, this is Lieutenant James Ingram of the Alaska Coast Guard. I'm afraid I have some bad news.
And Navarro is silent about it because she doesn't want Pete to stick around. She wants Pete to get home. She's looking out for him in this moment. Hey, get home to your family. I'm fine. But clearly she's not okay because we see what she does later. Pete gets home. He apologizes to Kayla. Navarro speeds off. She sees the prick from episode 1, keeps a mental note of it, goes to the lighthouse, has a rage fit, breaks shit, says, what kind of place is this?
You just let people fucking die! What the fuck? You're fucking kidding me!
By the way, so remember in episode 1, Pete's son draws like a picture of a monster woman with blue hair. Do you think now that maybe he's got the third eye or whatever, and he was actually drawing a picture of Julia's death?
Maybe.
I immediately connected that to Julia, like as soon
Yeah.
as
Interesting.
Like I already had an idea because of the blue hair, but now if you put, because he was really disturbed by the picture too, and then Navarro happens to get the call when she's in the car with Pete.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe.
that's a yeah.
I like that. And then Navarro goes back and sees that guy again, and she just loses her mind, gets out, punches him in the face, starts fighting all three of them, and then she gets her ass beat, of course, because there's 3 people, you're going to get overpowered. And then Danvers, driving, almost crashes into that one-eyed polar bear again, but she swerves off and crashes into the road. I actually thought the shot of her looking at the polar bear was pretty cool. And then Navarro, where's she gonna go? Of course, she goes to Kavik's, and he feels really bad. She shows him the stone with the swirl on it.
What is this?
They have a moment of talking. She doesn't tell him about Jules at this point, but he acts like he wants to talk about their relationship when he really just wants to snap her finger back into place.
It's done.
Fuck you, comic!
So now we're on Christmas, the 8th day of night. Navarro goes to Danvers and says Tagak is gone. She lost the stone with the spiral, but it's probably just at Kavik, so she can go back and get it.
Oh, we see Kavik take it out of her thing, so it's at his house for sure.
Yeah, so that's not going to be a big deal. And Navarro finds the one-eyed polar bear stuffed animal that she had a vision of, and now this is when she starts to get trippy in her own mind. And then she has this fit about how dead people are dead, and there's nothing else to it, and she proves it by throwing the stuffed animal outside because she's like, well, if you think that, then why are you still holding on to something of your son's? And she's like, yeah, you think I care about this? Toss it outside. And then this is when she tells her about Jules.
My sister killed herself last night.
She feels really bad about her. She walked out into the frozen sea until she fell in and drowned.
Walked onto the sea. Just walk.
She says what she thinks was really wrong with her. But then this is when she's talking about it happened to her mom. It happened to Jules. Now it's coming for me. She's calling me now.
It takes us one by one. And you know who's next?
And we see what happens with that at the end of the episode. So she brings up the Wheeler case and says how she saw a ghost or she saw a vision or something like that. I'll put that in right here.
I was there, and you saw something in that room. It was a ghost. Or, some kind of spirit.
She denies it, but clearly something went down. Danvers is getting thoughts about that case and how it's all seeming very familiar at this point. And then Pete calls about fishermen spotting something, and it looks to be a photo of Clark. At least someone wearing the jacket that Clark was wearing. That was Annie's jacket, right? With the patched shoulder. So he's at a place called the Dredge. They go there, they go inside, they find the swirl, and then they see someone running. Danvers swears it's Clark. She says, hey, Clark, stop. Navarro stops. She hears voices. She sees a vision of someone swimming, so she goes and follows that, doesn't follow Danvers. Danvers is on her own. She closes in on the suspect. She's like, hey, put your hands up. He puts his hood up. It's Otis. It's Otis with Clark's jacket on. We, the Annie's jacket, we see all that. But then Navarro, she is following like wet footsteps that she sees, and it was, the person that was swimming, possibly walking, and she turns and sees a ghost-like figure. Was it
That's what threw
Jules?
me off. It was Jules, yeah, blue hair.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that was the body she saw as well, blue hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, got it. And then Otis says Clark went back down to hide.
He went back down to hide.
Navarro is sitting down. They're doing like a split, showing two different things at once here. Her ears are bleeding. So did her eardrums burst like the other people?
I did see that.
Okay.
Because she made a point to like pull her jacket aside so you could
That's
see.
like, because I was trying to look for it,
Yeah.
but I didn't see the blood. So, okay, that explains
Yeah,
that.
no, I was not thinking. I was trying to figure out where that connected, but that might make sense, Dan.
And then Otis says,
"We're all in the night country now."
That's how the episode ended. Starting with the opening scene, Jules is being incinerated. We see that it's 12:31, the 14th day of night.
Is anybody else super uncomfortable when they handed her the urn and they're like, be careful, it's hot?
Be careful, it's hot.
Is this like a sizzling plate at Chi-Chi's? Like, I don't.
As Jules said, the urn was given to Navarro. And then Danvers goes to see Otis. She asks about Clark. She asked how he survived his injuries. And he's like, well, it's been 30 years. You really think I survived my injuries? She asked about Clark again. And he was like, he's a weird guy. He said she's awake multiple times.
Said that a bunch of times. He said, I have to hide. She's out there. Creepy motherfucker.
And then he was talking about the day he got his injuries and they were in the cave. He heard screaming, howling, and then all of a sudden woke up in the hospital with the injuries. So he doesn't really know how he got them. The burst eardrum, the burnt eyeballs. It just kind of happened. It was like a blackout moment and it happened. So he really wasn't no help with that, but he's going to be help with locating how to get into the cave later. That's what she wants. He wants heroin. She goes, hell no, I'm not going to get you heroin.
I can't get you heroin. You know that.
For now. That's what she says for now. And then we see Kayla and Pete. They're still having their little tiff. She wants him out, at least for the night, tells him not to come home.
No, hold, Kayla,
Please,
you can't.
just go.
So then Danvers and Navarro, they're in the car. They're talking about how the cave is on Silver Sky property. Of course, Silver Sky is the owner of the mines. That's the whole mine facility. And they're having a conversation about the protests. And the protests are happening because the water is poisoning people.
They're not crazy. It's the fucking water. I know. It's poisoning. All right, I know.
Then Leah and her girlfriend are getting ready for another protest. We find out later that her girlfriend is not a ride or die, and we'll get to that in a minute. Navarro and Danvers go to the cave entrance, but it's been blown shut.
It looks like somebody blew the entryway shut.
Because of course they fucking did.
Fuck! Hey! Fuck this shit!
We find out specifically that Silver Sky is in on whatever happened to Annie K. That is confirmed in this episode. Pete is outside of Hank's house as he is singing, and I wonder if that was really him singing. Really good voice. Really good voice.
There is no God.
Standing outside of his house on the phone, and he asks if he can stay with him. Their relationship was always really up and down. But back to the protest. So Navarro sees a vision of Annie K, and then she kind of vanishes. And then she sees Leah getting her ass beat. Leah's girlfriend runs off. She's like, oh, good luck. I'm out.
I got you into this, but I'm not going to stick around.
Doesn't help. Navarro jumps in. She fights off the other cop for her. And we find out later that cop got suspended for hitting Leah.
Good though.
Navarro's in the car with Leah, and she finds out that Danvers wants her to get taken into custody.
She wants me to take you in.
So we get that scene, and then we get another bit of a Tuttle United reference.
I followed their tax returns, and they trace back to Tuttle United. You remember them? Which is a founding partner of
Silver Sky Mining.
The founding partner of Silver Sky Mining, which we knew that before, but the mine bankrolls Salal, and Salal pushes fake pollution numbers for them. So this is information that Pete just found.
The mine bankrolls Salal, and then Salal pushes out bogus pollution numbers for him.
And then Pete talks to Leah in her cell, who is pissed at her girlfriend for bailing, and I don't blame her. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, rightfully so.
She just totally bounced. And then she gives advice how to win Kayla over again, and it's a little nice moment. I like the bond that Leah and Pete have, at least.
She just misses that guy, Pryor. Don't let Liz ruin that guy, okay?
And then Danvers and Navarro have a conversation. Here's what they say.
Where are you going?
Going to meet Kate McKittrick and Connolly about the protests.
What? Why? It's a trooper's job. Exactly.
Connolly's like, I need you there and I'm going to be there. And she's like, why the hell are you going to be there? Okay, so Connolly is there. Kate is questioning about why they went to the mine entrance since it's their property.
Why are you and Trooper Navarro in a remote section of Silver Skyland? It's just a question, Liz.
It's police business. Has to do with the Salal investigation.
And then she's like, well, this isn't even a murder case. And then they show that it was an avalanche that did it. And that's what killed them. And it was just an accident. Then she brings up how they fund Salal. She's like, well, why are you funding Salal? She's like, oh, we like to help out in the community. And she's like, no, that's bullshit. You fund Salal so that they can put fake numbers out for people to believe that you're doing the right thing. And then Danvers says to Connolly,
The two cases are linked.
but then he pulls out his trump card.
William Wheeler. It was a murder-suicide, except there was no suicide, was there?
He knows that either she or Navarro killed Wheeler. We still don't know which one did it. I mean, do you guys have a guess on which one did it? I would guess Navarro did it.
No, this
I
is
feel like
clearly planned that we learned. So I think, Navarro's probably the one that pulled the trigger.
You know, he said there was no suicide in the murder-suicide case at the Wheelers, and he's using it as leverage to try and close this case and get Danvers to stop looking into the mine because Kate really doesn't want her to go into that mine. So they're working together. So the next scene, Hank meets up with Kate, and this is when clear as day at this point that Kate has involvement in it and she's hiding something because she says Danvers isn't going to let this go. She can't find that cave. She's worried about Otis, and she's implying that she wants Hank to kill Otis. She won't actually say it. She even makes Hank say, hey, I didn't say that.
I need to hear you say it. You didn't ask me to kill anyone. Otis Heiss is a drug addict. Drug addicts get lost. I don't need to know the details.
And he's like, I'm not a killer.
I'm not a killer.
What is she hiding? We'll find out next week. And Ted Connolly, he's in on it. We know that for a fact. And they have some dirt on Hank. We find out later what that dirt is, that he moved Annie K's body. We'll get to that scene later. Then Kalvik brings the stone back with the swirl on it, brings this guy named Kenny over to talk about the swirl, and he says that they are a warning.
Well, my grandpa, he told me to walk away when I saw those. People would leave them as a warning for hunters.
What kind of warning?
Places where the ice would swallow them whole.
Navarro is obsessed about getting into the caves.
People call those caves the night country.
But then Danvers tells her about the excuse of the freak weather event and then tells her that they know about Wheeler.
He knows about Wheeler. What did he say? He knows all of it.
One of them killed him for sure, and we'll find that out, I'm sure. Maybe we'll even see the scene next week. Maybe we'll see how it went
I think
down.
so.
I hope so. And Navarro lets out Leah at this point.
Fuck Liz.
Navarro and Rose are breaking ice to pour Jules' remains into the ocean. She figured that's where she'd want to be.
If you wanted to be in the ocean.
And then she hears a voice call out to her. She starts to walk out further into the sea. The ice cracks. She goes into a little vision scene again where she starts to see that desert land again. And then Rose calls to her. She snaps out of it. She sees the ice cracking, lays down, and Rose helps pull her clear of danger. So Navarro, again, slipping more and more and more as the season progresses. It's like whatever is coming after her, as she says, it went after her mother and then Jules and now her. We're seeing it make progress onto Navarro. Danvers goes to see Leah at Pete and Kayla's. She wants her to come home for New Year's Eve. Leah's just still really pissed about the whole mining situation. She brings up that there's been 9 stillborn babies lately.
Last 3 months.
Last 3 months, but she's not giving up on her yet.
You know, I haven't given up on you.
So we'll see if their relationship mends by the end of the season. So then Danvers asks Pete, who he talked to, about Wheeler because she knows that Hank knew, and that's how Connolly found out. She's like, bring your computer in here.
What's the password to your computer? Is your birthday?
No.
Oh, let me guess. It's Darwin's.
Rookie move, man.
Your dad's not that dumb. He might look dumb, but he's not dumb. So obviously your dad went through your computer. He found files. That's how he told Connolly. So this is on you, Pete. You got to be smarter than that. They talk about Wheeler. He asks if she knew Wheeler was left-handed because the shot to his head was from a right hand, and it just doesn't add up that a lefty would shoot himself with the right hand. So again, that doesn't make the case look good to cover it up as a murder-suicide.
And they also show that all the photos of the girlfriend that had been experiencing abuse, they'd all been doctored to be flipped the other way.
Yeah,
and
they've been
that's how I noticed.
Someone flipped every single photo.
And also that Danvers and Navarro it wasn't a one-time thing like we would have thought with the call. They had gone to go see Wheeler 10 times on record.
10 times you were there.
Well, then Pete finally gets the courage to ask this question.
Did you and Navarro shoot William Wheeler and make it look like a suicide?
She doesn't answer, but of course we know the answer to that is yes. At this point, Danvers is like, yo, you can't trust your dad. You cannot stay with him. Go stay with me. Go stay in the shack behind my house. You don't have to talk to me. We don't have to interact at all. But you cannot be near your dad right now. We cannot trust him right now. He's clearly working with Connolly. We can't trust Connolly right now because he's clearly working with Kate. So it all adds up. So Pete goes to the shack behind Danvers' place and he goes there to set up. Danvers went to Otis. She brought heroin. She did come through with what he wanted in order to get him to help. Then she calls Navarro and says, meet at my place, says they are going to go where Annie died. So, of course, Navarro's going to be like, fuck yeah, let's do this. That's all she wants. She wants to crack the Annie K case. It's been haunting her for 6 years. So she's going to be right over. And she was cuddling with Kopic at this point, and they had a nice moment. He was like, please just come back. So that
I
also
actually
gives me,
really liked that.
I like that too, but that also gives me a little bit of, when stuff like that happens, sometimes the character gets
Yeah,
killed.
like, please just come back means she's not coming back.
Coming back, yeah.
You're not gonna stop me? Just come back, okay? Come back.
So then they're back at Danvers' place. Otis keeps asking for the drugs, and she's like, oh, not yet. Point to the highest point of the cave for us to get in. He points to it. Luckily, he does that. Then he goes into the bathroom to get high. Hank shows up saying,
Otis Heiss, I'm supposed to take him in.
What for?
Something about an outstanding warrant, he skip bail and no attack or some shit.
He's acting really shady, really suspicious. He's trying to get him killed, obviously. Hank gets hostile with Danvers. And then he pulls a gun on Otis once Otis starts to walk away. And then he shoots Otis.
He doesn't want to see you do anything fucked up, okay?
Hey!
And then he shoots him in the head, kills Otis.
Jesus Christ.
And then Pete walks in, pulls the gun on Hank. He's like, what the hell's going on here?
You should know something. I didn't kill Annie K. I just moved her body.
And then right after he says that, Pete kills his own dad, kills Hank, shoots him right in the head. What the fuck? That was nuts.
Blood is blood, Peter. Remember that.
No!
All right, so Navarro shows up. She's like, what the hell is going on? This is a shit show. There's 2 people dead. One of them's Hank. Like, what the fuck is going on? Danvers says she's going to call Connolly. Navarro's like, no, you cannot call Connolly. He's in on this.
I want to call Connolly. No. Yeah, you gotta call him right now. Listen.
And Danvers should have known that by now, and she shouldn't even have thought to call Connolly because, of course, he's in on this. He sent Hank, or at least had Kate sent Hank. Bad move. But Navarro stops her, and she comes up with a plan to cover it up. And she's like, yo, the storm's closing in. We have to go right now.
The storm will help cover our tracks. That's why we have to go right now.
So then Danvers is like, shit, I got to get cleaning then.
We gotta clean this up.
And Pete's like, no, I got this. I'll clean it. You guys got to go. Yeah, poor Pete. He's got to clean up his own father death scene. Navarro says, clean, get the bodies to Rose, and then tell her to take the bodies to Julia. Repeat after me. You need to say it.
Say it.
Take me to Julia.
So then Navarro and Danvers head out to the caves with the exact point on the map that Otis pointed out before he was killed. So they know where to go, they know where to get in, and we're set up for the finale. It kicks off with Navarro and Danvers breaking through the mine entrance from the location they got from Otis. Navarro seems to feel a presence, and she says it's here and leads them through a small crevice.
You feel it too, don't you?
Saying it's this way, it's over here, but it's blocked. Danvers wants to go back. Navarro says,
Can't you hear it? What? She's calling.
But then she falls through a layer of the ice to a bottom layer, and then Danvers also falls through to that layer as well. And then there's Clark. Here he is. He's down there, and there's like a little station set up down there, and the swirl is on the ceiling. So then Danvers finds an object with a star shape.
Star-shaped wound.
And that's what we knew that Annie was stabbed with. So murder weapon. There you go. That's the murder weapon. And then they find an opening that leads to a ladder. They go up, Twist and Shout's playing. Where does the ladder go? It goes right to Salao. So this was a little underground research center right under Salao. And that's how they got down there. So then we see poor Pete cleaning up the crime scene. We'll get back to that in a little bit. And then back at the station, Navarro sees wet footsteps. Danvers turns off the music again because we know she hates that song. She hates the Beatles. And then Clark traps Danvers in a freezer. And then he manages to knock out Navarro with a fire extinguisher.
How that didn't kill her. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, knocks her out
That
pretty
thing was
good.
hefty.
Danvers manages to break out of the freezer, and then she goes to find Navarro beating Clark's ass. So she woke up from the knockout and then took over over and starts to whoop on him. So then we see Leah come home because her mom asked her to come spend New Year's Eve with her. So she does show up. Pete's cleaning and he was finishing up and there was a bullet in the wall. So he's like, I don't want her to know what's going on. And Leah's clearly on to him. She's like, what the hell is going on?
What the fuck is going on? It's just, the whole Kayla thing has kind of got me messed up.
He's like, can I just take you back to my house? I don't want Kayla and Darwin to be alone on New Year's Eve. She agrees. And then back to Clark. He wakes up, says he loved Annie, doesn't want to talk. They show him the video. He starts to freak out. And then they tape earbuds to his ears to make him listen. And it's on a loop. So he's going to have to listen to her screaming over and over and over again. And then they go on a coffee break to make him endure this for some time. Pete drops Leah off back at home, but Kayla is suspicious and jumps in the car. He says he needs to do one last thing, and then he'll be home safe with her and Darwin. She kisses him, tells him to stay safe. So it looks like their relationship's back on good terms at this point. Back to Clark. He says he wasn't there at first.
Were you fucking there?
Not at first. She found some notes, and she started to piece together what we were doing.
They were digging for DNA that could save the world. This is something that we knew about from that teacher that said this earlier, that they were working on really big stuff that could, cure cancer and extend life and all that stuff. And he says the pollution from the mine helped.
Because the pollution from the mine helped soften the permafrost.
They wanted more pollution. They're kind of like, cut the shit. What happened to Annie? You got to tell us. And he says she destroyed their work. Now we're day of. He hears her screaming. He runs down, so he wasn't there at first. Lund was the one who first stabbed her, and then all of the scientists joined in and stabbed her 32 times. Clark did not, but she wakes up. She's not completely dead, so Clark finished the job when she wasn't quite dead, so he did join in. Okay, but then they ask about the tongue. They're like, well, why'd you cut out her tongue? And Clark's like, that wasn't us, and then we know the mines did it to kind of send a message, and then they sent Hank to move the body. So this is how the mines are involved. They didn't kill her, but they wanted them to keep doing the fake numbers for the pollution because the scientists wanted more pollution, and that was good for the mines, so they could keep making more money off of it. So that's the tie-in of how they work together. After they get this info, Navarro pulls a gun to Clark's head, and she's about to do it. She's like, "You're not going to stop me?
You're not gonna stop me? No.
Danvers walks off. She's like, nope. And then we get the flashback to the Wheeler case, and we see that it was Navarro who killed Wheeler, but Danvers says she was going to do it herself. But we got that scene. I'm happy we got that scene to see that she shot Wheeler.
Navarro.
And then they're like, well, what happened to your buddies? Who killed the scientist? And Clark's like, Annie did it.
Annie killed them.
Did you see them die?
He knew she'd come back. When all this shit went down, he hid in the hatch. He said he was there for an hour or a week. He doesn't really know. He was just hiding there. And that comes back into play later. We'll get into it. And then after this, we see no more Clark. He goes outside and freezes to death. So Navarro let him go, kind of knowing that he'd do that because he said earlier,
Please, I'm so tired. Just do it. Let me do it.
And then they're kind of screwed because the power went off. So Navarro is trying to turn on an emergency generator. And did you guys see the person flash in the background? It was like an image of someone. Do you think it was like a ghost of Annie or something like that?
I think it was Annie, actually.
Back to Rose. So the theories that Rose was not real are not true. She is in fact real. She was loading up a gun when Pete shows up. He says,
Navarro sent me. She says, take me to where Julia is. I got someone who's going in the same place, Rose.
Then Leah calls Danvers and leaves a message concerned.
It's me again. Just call me back, okay? Hey, just don't die out there or anything, please.
Danvers is going after Navarro, who is in her desert land again. And we find her name, her true name is... All right, now they're both outside. Danvers is looking for Navarro while Navarro's having this trippy scene. And then she sees an image of Holden in the ice and she tries to break him out. And then she falls through the ice and she's about to die. So luckily, Navarro comes back in time to pull her out, gets her near the fire. She's having trouble breathing. So then, as Danvers is struggling to breathe, we get a flashback to the accident that killed Holden. It was a car accident, drunk driver accident, and she's having memories of him. She's still struggling to breathe, but then she manages to say to Navarro, "What did Holden say to you?" When they were talking about this earlier, Navarro says that he sees you, as she covers one eye. So back to Pete and Rose. They're breaking through the ice exactly where Julia was laid to rest with her ashes. Rose says to look away. He's like, "No, I want to watch." She's like,
You want to see how I cut your father to let the air out of his lungs so he doesn't float?
He's like, "All right, I'll look away." When he went to her, she was like,
It's going to be one of those nights, isn't it?
it's like she's
Right.
been through this dance before.
She's seen some shit.
So they lay Hank to rest in the water, and then we see it's January 1st, the 15th day of night, so it's way more than 2 weeks of night. And Navarro and Danvers can leave now because the storm is over. The Northern Lights shot is dope. I really hope someday I can see Northern Lights in person.
Me too.
I really want to see that in person one day. That would be amazing. And then Danvers gets the idea because he said he was hiding under the hatch, right? So they pour some kind of liquid on it. They get the UV light, and then they find a handprint with 2 fingers missing. So it's Blair. Someone called that from our live stream. Yeah, from our live stream. So Blair and the cleaners, we know they were involved with the scientist dying. So the question wasn't
Who killed Annie Kay? But who knows who killed her?
They go to see the cleaners. B and Blair are the 2 main people there. Navarro asks, "Do you know what my name means?"
Do you know what it means? It means the return of the sun after the long darkness.
It's like she finds who her true self is by, like, you can see there's a calm that washes over her when she learns, oh, that's what my true name is, and that's what I've been waiting for.
So then we see what happened to the scientists. The cleaners found the secret cave because they spilled mop water and it was dripping down. So they decided to go down and check it out. And they said when they were there, they were pretty much invisible, so they could just go on their merry way and do whatever they want. So they knew. They found the murder weapon. They knew the scientist killed Annie. So it was all of them that went with guns. And I actually thought that was pretty badass when they all showed up with guns.
It was.
Listen to us, fuckers. You guys are fucked. We know what you did. So they held them all at gunpoint. They loaded them into the truck, ordered them to take their clothes off. They drew the symbol on one of their heads and made them run off into the ice. And they didn't technically kill them. What was it, Vex? They decided the spirits would decide if they lived or not.
We sent them out on the ice because we thought she wanted them, and we folded their clothes and left it there.
Yeah, right.
So
they could have survived.
Yeah, if she didn't want them, then they could come back.
Then they're kind of like, well, what's going to happen? We just told you a story. And Navarro says, stories are stories. And Danvers jumps in and says, we just swung by to inform you guys that the cause of death was an avalanche. Case closed. They're letting them go.
We just swung by to inform you that the forensics came back. Cause of death is a slab avalanche.
And then we get to May 12th, the first day of the long year. So that's how long it's dark for. That's crazy, man. I could never live there. They're interviewing Danvers about Hank. She says Otis was found in his trunk.
And Hank, Officer Pryor, when he went to dispose of the body, suffered some accident in the blizzard.
And maybe they'll find him in the summer. Maybe not. What about Navarro? We see that she left the SpongeBob toothbrush back for Kavik, and she left a stuffed polar bear with one eye on her bed with her phone, and on the phone was Clark's confession video. In this video, he tells the truth about the pollution caused by Silver Sky mining.
Pollution levels in the region are 11 times higher than those currently acceptable by the Vienna Convention, knowingly created by Silver Sky.
This gets the mine shut down. So that's how they get justice on the mine. No theories on Navarro. She's kind of just quiet. We find out that she does know where she is later, but then we see that Leah and Navarro are in a good place. They're in the car laughing together, and we see that Pete is with Darwin, so he's back with his happy little family. They still want to know where's Navarro, but then we see in the final shot, she's with Danvers at the end in a cabin, so they're both safe together. Thanks so much for watching this recap. If you would like us to do more recaps like this in the future, just let me know in the comments. This is the first time we've ever done this. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Later.
Hey, sorry about the divorce.
It's not a divorce, Chief.
Whatever.